Hello and welcome to episode 74 of the HamCorp Training Manual. In this episode, we will expand the control tower to have a centralized item and fluid storage system. We will also start progressing towards cheaper circuits using our new Naquata doped wafers and a brand new industrial autoclave. It is time to massively expand our fluid and item storage. I've been doing okay so far, but as you can see my drives are... some of them are full, some of them no longer have type capacity. There's still a few that do, but it's not a lot. So I'm slowly coming up on my item limit. And I want to start centralizing some of this item storage, or at least fluid storage. Because I just have like a bunch of different oxygen tanks around the place. I'd like to just have it all go into one place. I think that's a bit nicer. I think the control tower is the perfect place to make an expansion. And I think I'm going to go for the 256K ME storage components. It's bigger than what I have. Right now I'm using 64Ks. But the reason I want to use the 256Ks is because I have the cheapest version of the EV circuit. I would have gone for the 1024Ks, but I don't have the cheapest version of the IV circuit, which is the crystal processor. Same thing for the fluids. I'll be using the EV circuit version. Oh, I showed the crafting table version, but this is more expensive. You want to do this one, the circuit assembler version. And it saves a lot of time because you don't have to incrementally upgrade your storage components. But time for a little bit of renovation. Made myself a couple of 256 ME storage cells. I want to do something a little special with the fluid ones, and maybe the item ones as well, but not yet. So using the cell workbench, I want to partition some of these fluid storage cells, and I want to put sticky cards in them. The sticky card makes it so that when AE2 tries to store a certain liquid or fluid, it can only put it in the storage cell. So it's a nice way to centralize our storage, but I do want to specify what fluid goes in here. I want to do this for some of the most common fluids we have. For example, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, chlorine, fluorine, all of those, all the kind of elemental ones, I just want them to go only in these fluid storage cells, which does mean I'll have to refactor some things around the base because currently there's stuff being stored in super tanks and stuff. I'm going to remove those super tanks and replace them with dual interfaces. So any output hatch that creates, say, oxygen sends it straight into our main fluid storage. And I think I'll do something similar with items, but I don't know. There's not a lot of items that I particularly care that they're in one place. Maybe some outputs like the platline metal outputs, the dusts. I don't know, the items I'm not too bothered about, to be honest, because these storage drives are already plenty of space, even though they're being shared with multiple types of items. And if I upgrade these to 256s, then yeah, I just have plenty of space. So for now, I'm mostly going to be assigning specific fluids for the fluid storage cells, and I'll think about items some more, I guess. Down here, I've placed a bunch of drives. There's a lot of space. 160 slots on each wing of this building. That's a lot. That's a lot of storage. I would have made the whole 160 of each of these, but they're kind of expensive because the storage components need circuits. And I didn't want to craft a billion circuits yet because now that I have Naquata doped wafers, there are a lot of new laser engraver recipes that are faster and cheaper than what we've been doing so far, and I haven't gone through them and replaced them all because a lot of them need stuff from the water processing line. It's basically water purification, but I wanted to look at that before doing this. So I'm only going to make these 256K cells as I need them, but eventually the goal is to get rid of all of these drives that are here upstairs in the tower and have everything downstairs here in like mass storage. I have started moving some of my fluids over into these storage cells, and then I realized there's something I do need to be a little careful about. So far, I've moved everything from this final step of ore processing into the cells. So everything just goes into this one ME output hatch, and that sends it to the cells. And that's fine, and I've done that for the special ore processing building as well, along with the plat line downstairs. And I was going to get started on moving kind of these chemical byproducts, because some of these have like a storage tank that's just for a byproduct that you get. But one of these byproducts could be, for example, oxygen or something. But then I realized, like, for example, when I make nitrogen and oxygen from centrifuging air, this is going to happen infinitely. I don't want to hook up any infinite production into my storage cells because what will happen is the infinite process will keep running. Eventually my storage cell will fill up. And then around the base, all the other stuff that I have that's being sent to storage will clog because there's no space in storage. So I think any infinite processes like this, I'm going to just have a storage tank set up like so. I might upgrade these to bigger storage tanks, but essentially I'm not going to put the outputs directly into AE2. I'm only going to do that for processes that are not infinite. Actually, if you think about it, everything in my chemicals building should not be connected in that way, because I don't want my storage to clog up anything in here, because all of these need to keep running until their primary output is full. So here, for example, I've got my sodium hydroxide. That's what this chem reactor is for. And it stops as soon as I have enough sodium hydroxide. As part of this chemical reaction, I get some hydrogen out, and that goes into the super tank, which right now I have connected with a fluid storage bus. I could instead replace this with an ME output hatch, and that would send the hydrogen straight into storage. But it's possible that I would eventually be full on hydrogen, and then I would no longer be generating sodium hydroxide. And the entire chemicals building kind of works like that. So that's nice. Less work for me. I don't need to migrate anything in here. And I guess it's a similar thing in the benzene part. Because I'm making logs infinitely, this is all kind of infinite. So none of this should be directly connected to my bulk fluid storage. But for oil products, I do need to move, because oil is finite. At least for me, it's finite. If I ever get around to doing oily bees or whatever, and I have infinite oil, then I'll have to come back to this and undo everything I've done. So yeah, I don't know. I think I might do that eventually in the future, so I think I'm not going to migrate these, which means I'm done. So in my fluid storage, currently, I've only got chlorine, oxygen, fluorine, nitrogen, hydrogen, and heavy oil. And these 256K fluid cells can store a lot. I've also slowly started moving everything over to the 256 drives and crafting more as I need them. It's quite good. I've already cleared up an entire drive, but there's more to clear up. So I'm going to keep working on that. There are also these multifluid storage cells, by the way. These can hold 5 types instead of 1, and that's pretty nice for all of these random, like, small amount fluids that I have stored here. For example, the molten incolloy, molten hastelloy, all of these random, like, GT++ compounds. So I'm going to make some multifluid cells as well, and those are not going to be sticky. So those are just kind of random access memory, I guess. Oh man, that took some time, but I'm done. Got a bunch of multifluid storage cells, a couple of partitioned regular fluid cells, and 40 256K ME storage cells. This contains basically all of my items that are not stored in drawers, and I have 3 completely empty ones. So I imagine these will fill up quite quickly. So I really want to get around to making some cheaper circuits. And I think I would like to do that before doing any chemline upgrades, because if I have cheaper circuits, then doing these upgrades will also be cheaper. There are 2 things I want to make immediately. First of all, the industrial autoclave. This is the multi-block autoclave. I think I can mostly make this. The only problem here is lithium compound, purely because I need argon gas to make it, and I don't have any. So one way to get argon is from centrifuging liquid air, and I think this is the method I'm going to go for, because I also get nitrogen, oxygen, and noble gases. And the noble gases includes deuterium, which I'm sure will be useful in the future. But liquid air comes from vacuum freezing air, so it's pretty easy. I can just use an air intake hatch, and that should be pretty straightforward to automate. On top of the industrial autoclave, I would like to start working on the water line. It seems a little complicated, so to be honest, I might end up waiting on this a little bit. And what I'm going to do instead for the Naquato doped wafers is I'm just going to use distilled water. And I'm going to go through all of my wafer engraving recipes and upgrade them to use Naquato doped wafers. I'm also going to try and upgrade all of these multi-blocks in the blasting hall from EBFs to vulcanite. I've said I'm going to do that for the last like 10 episodes, but I just have very slowly been doing it. And I think I might have come up with a way to request multi-blocks at a time from crafting. I don't know if anyone else has ever come up with this. I've never seen it anywhere. It's a little weird, but basically what I've done is I have a written book, and I named it Cryogenic Freezer. And I have this recipe that gives you the book, and it takes all of the parts of a cryogenic freezer as inputs, except for input and output hatches, input and output buses, because those will vary based on where I'm using the cryogenic freezer. So those I'll just handle manually. But I've encoded this recipe, and I've put it in this interface. So what's going to happen is if I request the book, it's going to try and craft all of the parts that are in the inputs and put it into the chest. And then eventually, once I have all the parts and they're all in the chest, what it's going to look like on the crafting status is something like this. I don't know why this recipe is stalled, but kind of useful for my explanation. It's going to look something like this, and it's just going to say crafting cryogenic freezer, like the book version. I have that book on me, so when it's done, I can just cancel the craft, or I can feed the book back into the interface to actually complete the craft. I don't know if there's a nice way to automate that final step of letting the system know when the craft is complete, but this is pretty good. This is good enough for me, I think. I have some material shortages, clearly, so I need to deal with that as well. Look at this. Looks like it worked. All of the items are in the chest. Yeah, I'm going to be doing this from now on for sure. Now, I'm going to get to work on making the industrial autoclave. I am just about ready to start the craft for the industrial autoclave, but let me quickly show you how I set up argon. It's very simple. I have an air intake hatch on this cryogenic freezer that turns it into liquid air, and then I just centrifuge it. That's it. Pretty cool multi. Very unique shape. Now, there are a couple of parameters, I guess you can call them. First of all, obviously the energy hatch. After that, we have pipe casings and the item pipe casings. You want to use the highest possible tier for these, as high as you can go. For me, I did the platinum item pipe casings and the tungsten steel pipe casings. This gives you more parallels and an EU discount. There's also a line of coils at the top. This gives you a speed bonus. So I went with HSSS, which is the highest I have so far. I could make the Naquata coils now, but I haven't done that yet. But this thing is a big upgrade over what we have before. So I'm gonna get to migrating all of my autoclave recipes over. I still also need to migrate my laser engraver recipes, so I'm gonna do that as well. And after that, let's start on the LUV circuit assembler. Now, starting at LUV, circuit assembly is a little different. Like it says in the quest here, the cost of creating circuits is now 6 times higher, and this is intended for circuits needing LUV plus voltage. So we need a new assembly line, the circuit assembly line. To make that, we do need the single block circuit assembler, but this is not going to be our main way of making circuits. Surely everything will be explained soon, right? There's a couple of fetch quests I need to do here. These are all materials I have or I can make. Prasiolite, I don't know about this. I have to look at this a little closer. I guess it says in the quest here. But there's also cubic zirconia, which we've looked at before. And there's also tellurium. The quest for the circuit assembly line is here. It's a little hidden because there is another quest I need to do. Luckily, that is pretty straightforward. It's just to make a LUV field generator, which is really not too bad. This is doable. So I'm going to start collecting these things, and if I run into any problems, I will let you know. But also, for these 3 specific materials, they seem like kind of a challenge to get. Well, I'm going to skip cubic zirconia, because I've showed that before. But for the other 2, I will also explain how I source them. Okay, our first new material that we need to get is prasiolite. And according to the quest, there are 2 different ways we can do this. First of all, we can make flawed prasiolite from putting quartzite and amethyst in an EBF. I do have a little bit of amethyst. It's not a lot, but I don't know if there is any other use for this. So I might just convert all of this amethyst into prasiolite. I have plenty of quartzite dust. However, once you have a T5 rocket, you can just get prasiolite ore directly from Ross 128BA. I do not have a tier 5 rocket, so I'm gonna have to do the EBF way. Prasiolite was pretty easy, but I can see the cost getting pretty high if I need to use a lot of these exquisite ones, because each one of these exquisite prasiolites needs 27 flawed prasiolites. The flawed ones are easy to make, but I'm going to run out of amethyst pretty quickly. Now, for tellurium, there are 2 ways I can do this, at least at this stage in the game. So I can EBF crushed lead ore for just straight up 2 tellurium nuggets, and I think that's probably my best option. But my other option would be to make rare earth 3 out of rare earths using industrial strength hydrofluoric acid. But I will say industrial strength hydrofluoric acid does not seem so easy to make. Well, there's a chem plant recipe that allows me to make more once I already have some. But making the initial batch, it's not crazy, but it's kind of annoying. Like, I don't want to do this right now. So I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to go with the crushed lead ore into an EBF, which is this recipe. And I don't think it's a big deal because from crushed lead ore, I basically just get silver at this point, silver and sulfur. So I have plenty of both. I literally have 309,000 silver, almost 700,000 sulfur. So I don't think I'll miss it. I did have to make bismuth telluride, just so you know. Now we can move on to the next quest. Using all of these things that we just made, we're going to want to make magnetoresonatic dust and circuit compound Mark III dust. These are combined in a forming press to make raw imprint supporting boards, and these go into an autoclave to get imprint supporting boards. Each individual step here is quite easy. It's just mixer, forming press, and autoclave. Now before continuing on to the next quest about imprints, I'm going to have to make the circuit assembly line, because these are used as part of the circuit assembly line. They're kind of useless by themselves, so let's get to work on that. Now if I'm understanding this correctly, the way it works is once you use an imprint on a circuit assembly line controller block, it locks that controller block to that specific circuit. So for every circuit that I want to automate, I need a new circuit assembly line. Well, I could get by with just a new controller block and swap them out, but that's a little annoying. I'd rather just take the extra cost of setting up and just make multiple circuit assembly lines. So that is quite expensive, and it's going to take some time to gather all the materials. I think I'm going to do more than just the 4 that it's asking for in the quest, because I currently have a lot more circuits that I want to make. This might be a little overkill, but I just want to be complete. So I need a circuit assembly line for ULV circuits. I'm going to need one for LV microprocessors. I'm going to need one for MV integrated processors, one for HV nanoprocessors, one for EV quantum processors, one for IV crystal processors, and then 3 more that I'm going to use for the crystal processor assembly, ultimate crystal computer, and crystal processor mainframe. These are obviously not the cheapest of their tier, because those are always on the furthest to the right, but I don't have access to those yet. So in total, I'm going to need 10 circuit assembly lines. That's a lot. That's going to take a while to craft, and I think that's going to have to wait till next episode, and I'm going to spend time between episodes crafting up all these items. And to help with that, I've already started making another precise auto assembler that I can use as a regular assembler, because actually these are better than the other version of the multi-block assembler, because you get a lot more parallels from this than the other one. So I need to make a bunch of Mark I casings here, and then I can make my second non-precise assembler. But yeah, there's a lot of crafting to do now. Thank you for watching this episode of the HamCorp training manual. In the next episode, we will imprint and set up our circuit assembly lines. We will also go through some of the older processing lines around the base and see where improvements can be made. HamCorp would like to remind all employees that the yearly performance review is but 1 month away and you are expected to attend. See you next time.